Okay, we're live. All right. Good morning. We are back in the Senate Judiciary on May 8th, and we have Dr. Matt Longo with us from the RTAF. Right? Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Let me begin by noting, for the record, that Farzana sorry, I always get her last name. I don't know why. Is not a signatory to the letter. Okay, she's from the Department of State's Attorney and Sheriffs. She wrote me long after the letter went out. I had no idea. But she got in touch with me and wanted me to note that she's not a signature. And that's just the way it goes. It has been a rough few years. I have been asking almost with that. And you know, when you start asking something all the time, and after a while you get tired of your own voice, because you're like saying the same words. I've gotten to that point with the RDAP. There is a fundamental incompatibility between the way the RDAP is structured and the way the legislature is structured. And yet, there was, after Justice Reinvestment 2, a great deal of interest from the legislature in this body and what it does, partly because of its makeup, that it is pretty much half and half governmental actors and community members. It leads to some very fascinating discussions, I have to say. But it also sets up some limitations. The legislature, as you well know, is partially. The RDAP is supposed to meet 10 months out of the year. We never do. We meet 12 and sometimes 15. And after Justice Reinvestment 2, one of the important things was felt to be, and this was expressed very clearly by Senator Sears, the late Senator Sears, by Martin Lalonde and Senator Hashi, and that the RDAP was really very, very useful in that it looks at legislation with an equity lens and says, this may be a problem, this may not be a problem, so on and so forth. That's the quick answer. In addition, we create biennial reports on the state of the criminal and juvenile justice systems, again, with an eye towards equity. I have to say that after Justice Reinvestment 2, a lot of that disappeared. And so for 3 years, I've been asking, well, let me start with this. For about 3 years, I've been thinking, what is the problem? Why are we not getting bills to look at? What do we do? And I remember bringing it up to Senator Hashimi. He's like, well, just go to the legislative website, which would be the easy answer. The problem is all of these people have jobs. Everyone has a job. If not a government job like Todd Deloche and Rebecca Turner, those are big jobs. We have community members. We have someone named Sheila Linton. She is the founder and director of the Root Social Justice Center in Brattleboro. She has more than a full-time job, if you take my meaning. No one has time to go to the website and really peruse it, particularly because, as you all know much better than I do, bills change within hours, sometimes, even overnight. And that's long, but it's still a problem for people who aren't primarily charged with going to that website. So that there are these structural problems. And I've spent 3 years thinking about that there is a structural problem, as I began with, between a part-time legislature and a panel that meets once a month for 2 hours on the second Tuesday between 6 and 8 p.m. RDAP standard time. what was interesting is I cannot look at one person and point the finger and go, this is the problem, which tells anyone who does this kind of work that the problem is systemic. Fine. That means we got to get a bunch of people sitting down around a table and talking through. That's where we have to start. I got very little play on that. I got very little play. And I can understand why. You know, I know your time off is very precious. I get that. Nevertheless, we need legislators to be there who are interested in this. I know, you won't get paid for that, but I would say welcome to our world. We don't either. It has to be a labor of love, of morality, of commitment, which I hope we have. At the moment, I'm a little confused. It feels, and I'll be very honest about this, these are the kindest words, I feel a bit like tinted window dressing. That what the RDAP is at this moment is a checkbox for we deal as a state with racial issues. I don't feel like we really do right now. I just don't. We don't have the time. We have been helped this session by the Division of Racial Justice Statistics, which is something that we gave birth to, as you probably read in the letter. We were very much helped just towards the end here with them. Again, they have trouble holding up everything. They do the best they can. It's not adequate. It's not adequate. They do a lot of good work. It's just this particular part of their mandate. Again, with the bills changing as quickly as they do, it's very hard for them to keep up. With the RDAP only meeting once a month, it's very hard to keep up. We have floated the idea of potentially meeting more than once a month during the session. How often? And are we going to have our community members look at us and go, yeah, no, we really can't do that. It's a conundrum. It's a big conundrum. And I will be honest, last session, when we got to the end of the session, knowing a lot of the bills that had come through had profound racial implications, or at least implications for the kind of high impact, high discretion moments that would themselves potentially lend themselves to the infiltration of bias, both implicit and possibly explicit. Seeing all those bills go by last session, and I guess having the academic background I do, I was dismayed. As I wrote in the letter when I presented to Joint Judicial in November of last year, I did a presentation, in fact, about how every time immigration comes up on the mass level in the United States, it becomes frankly very racist. And there's concomitantly an obsession with crime. And no matter what, even if there isn't really a lot of crime, everybody perceives it. And all of the organs that are charged with noting crime suddenly are not reliable. We have been through this as a nation, I don't know how many times. My dissertation was almost on Irish American identity and music. I couldn't write it because I could not be a Black person walking in to Irish bars in Southie or on the south side of Chicago. I would have been killed. So I abandoned it, but I know a lot about it. And it looked like that last year. I was very nervous about that. That suddenly crime, never mind that the FBI is going, we're in a historic low. Suddenly the FBI wasn't reliable. I'm going, I've seen this movie. I know how it turns out. I mean, if you look at the Boston papers from the early 20th century, in the middle of the migration, The Irish were drawn and depicted as caricatures of sub-Saharan Africans. They were in fact referred to using the epithet. Okay, here we are now, and people are getting rounded up and put in this terrifying place in El Salvador. Everyone who portrays immigrants, not just ones that are undocumented, as being criminals. And for those of us who studied this, it's really sad. As that pertains to the RDAP, well, we're in a position, partly because of our unique constitution of community members and government actors, to really look at those questions. And what I said finally back in November was there were all sorts of questions that this legislation brought up. One of them being, it's possible everyone's just automatically flipping into this racialized thinking that always accompanies mass immigration. But we won't know now because the bills passed. They either went or they didn't. They either went to the governor or they went in recycling. But the tragedy isn't, we know that that was what was happening here, is continuing to happen here, maybe. And that's the problem, is the maybe. And this then may become, as I said in the letter, a focus of later regret. It would indeed be ironic if the RDAP in its next biennial report ends up reporting on some of the legislation from the last two sessions. That would be tragic to me because I think it's critical. Also bear in mind the avoidance of such a thing creates harmony with a lot of the historically stigmatized communities which are growing around the state. It has gotten to the point, I'm so frustrated. I mean, last session I was dismayed. This session, my heart is broken. I realize that sounds very melodramatic, but it's truth. I put a lot into this. But what ends up happening is I have all the responsibility and none of the power. I can't even get people to sit around the table to discuss the issue. And so with that in mind, I'm resigning from the RDAP at the end of our meeting. It's too heartbreaking to be committed morally, ethically to this kind of work and to have it seem superfluous, unimportant, unnecessary, all of them. I do feel like window dressing at this point. And I can't allow that because I have to maintain credibility with the communities that I do work with in my day job, which is with the state police. More than that, I'm an activist. I have to maintain credibility with my communities. So that's really the most that I wanted to say. The most important question, though, really goes back to you. What does the legislature really want from the RDAP? That's where I'm going to end for right now.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Tom. I'll just say that, you were literally one of the first people I met when I moved to Vermont, and I've always known you to be extremely dedicated to all of the work that you do. And it's a major loss for the RDAP and communities in general. But I understand your position, or I understand your decision, you should say. The question, I also want to add, your work isn't superfluous, but I certainly understand why that I understand why you have that feeling. The work that you do is important to me, and I would like to know, I guess the most important question in my mind at the moment is what can be restructured so that it is easier for the RDAP to track what we're doing, to just be in regular communication with us. And just one last thing I wanted to add is, from my own position, there are certainly bills. I'm sure just about every single bill could potentially have an impact in some way on different demographics and equity in general. But there are also times where I just may not know. Somebody else might know,
Right.
and vice versa. But yeah, so I'll just leave it there.
To that end, first off, I can't answer everything. If I could, I would have done it. That's why I'm saying I recognize that this is a systemic problem, and that means that we've all got to sit in a room, roll up our sleeves, and talk it through. That's the only solution I've ever come to in systemic stuff. And there'll be people going, oh, well, we've always done it this way. You know this, right? I mean, and you were in law enforcement. How often do we hear that? But we've always done it this way. And it's like, okay, right. And we've had these problems. Let's move into something else. And people move. I mean, law enforcement is just inherently conservative in the way that it functions. It just doesn't lead. And so I get a little frustrated sometimes. I'm like, people just do it. But that's not how it works. And when it's systemic, you got to get everybody in the room. What I have in my own head is the RDAP needs staff. It needs dedicated staff. It needs a group of people who can look at the legislation and say, this is a big one, this is a smaller, so on. In other words, rank order. Because we're not going to guess. If you saw the list I put in the letter, it's hysterical. I mean, it's just like, we're going to get through all this. That's what makes me think we can't just have one meeting a month, certainly during the session. And how that affects everyone on the panel, I don't know. People have children, they have to make dinner for them and things like that. Those are just real life concerns that come into this. So we definitely need a staff that is dedicated to tracking the changes as quickly as they come through, or as close to that as possible. That would be a major thing.
Thank you. Yeah. As I'm sure you're probably not terribly surprised, I share some of your frustrations with the sort of last couple of years and the broad brush disregard for facts and data and the impact that the work we're doing is having on groups of people that are often not in the room. And I guess what I wonder, and this is purely not knowing, is how the RDAP interacts with the Office of Racial Equity, which I regularly ask to have come into the room, and in the past biennium actually even had to go on the wall that required anytime we were creating or changing criminal codes that we do a racial impact assessment.
Right.
But I do wonder, given that they do have staff, what the interplay is between the two.
There is as much interplay as literally can be done.
Okay.
The division is currently caught up in this brouhaha with the Department of Public Safety that they're trying to iron out so that they can actually do the first thing that we lined out for them when we wrote the report that helped you all bring them into existence.
Sorry, when you say division
of Racial Justice Statistics, I'll just say DOJS.
Which is part of the Office of Racial Equity, yes.
Right.
Okay.
It's under, and so they're still fighting with DPS over a memorandum of understanding for getting the data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I know data's been a huge problem.
Right. It's big, and they put a report out. It didn't go well. They thought they were looking at the right data set. They weren't looking at right? They said, oh my God, it was, everyone blew up. There was anger. There still is. I'm going to be, I may not be chair, but I'm going to kind of be the shadow figure that can work around these kinds of things. And that would be one that I believe, sort of set for you.
So I asked, I believe I don't actually know how many staff people that division has, but I spoke to a gentleman who works in that division a week or so ago about this exact problem.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I asked him, and we'll ask you as well, is are there legislative changes that are needed? Because by statute, you should have access to that data.
Right.
You do not. That's a problem.
Yes.
And so my question to you, again, and it's the same question I asked him a couple of weeks ago, is there action you need us to take to solve that?
I think every department that is connected to the RDAP, which has a proxy on it, has to do the memorandum of understanding. As far as that was actually declared in statute. But I know that DPS is reluctant. They need to get over that. I know that we have problems with the judiciary. Do they even keep data? Wasn't there something like that? It's like they don't even have the data. And it's sort of like, guys, we need this. You got to start keeping it. We can't do this unless we know. So that would be one other area that we would need help with. Those are the two I can come up with at the moment. I wish I could give you more, but I really think this has to be a group effort, and I haven't thought it all the way through on my own.
No, and I appreciate that. I just, and the larger Office of Racial Equity, sort of in my mind, that's why I almost always ask for them to come in to testify, and actually many of the bills that are on this list.
Right.
In my mind, that has sort of always been the full-time staff person government entity that is coming in to speak to these issues. But what I'm hearing is that that's not enough.
It's not. There are two issues. One, it's just not enough purchasing power. But secondly, there's a real danger of siloing this kind of work in an office that's racial or gender or fill in the blank, gender expression. There's a problem siloing it. Because what ought to happen in a really great world is that it just occurs to everyone. No matter their race, no matter their gender, it just occurs. And so siloing this, and there have been requests to move the RDAP from the aegis of the Attorney General into the Office of Racial Equity. I have been as vociferous as I can be about that. Is a horrible idea. Because it just continues with the siloing. God, you should have seen what we went through to get the research to write the report for that put the division together. I mean, getting that data, we were making jokes about once we got it, we needed to build a time capsule up on top of Camel's Hump because we're never going to be able to get it all again. That was humorous, but not entirely, because it really was a hassle. What do we do? Another question with these departments that have different systems for their data. And of course, this being a capitalist world, everybody's they're going to protect their propriety, these organizations that build the data systems for storage and retrieval. They're going to have proprietary interests, so they don't talk to each other. It's like, I live with this constantly. I'm Mac and Word. I want to screen. They do not talk to each other. My Google Calendar will have nothing to do with my Outlook calendar. It refuses. It's that kind of problem, but on a much faster scale. So what do we do with that? Those data systems, it's not like you walk into Staples and buy one. And we're talking price tags in the millions. So what do we do given that? And that's not an easy question to answer. We threw it off frankly, the RDAP. We passed that to the division. We were like, we ain't got an idea on this one. Maybe they will, because they're like data experts. And they're still trying to figure it out. They're still trying to make them all mutually influence one another, and they're working on it. I don't have any feeling about, I mean, these are people who are way beyond my sophistications with data and statistics. So I don't feel like I have anything to add to their conversations. I listen. And right now they're just trying to make what they have work. And there was, as I said earlier, an unfortunate moment with DPS. Everybody's angry at everyone. Nobody wants to talk. I'll be working on that. But that's as much of an answer, I think, as I can give.
Yeah, that's fair. I appreciate that. And to me, there's another problem that hasn't been named here, and that is accountability. Yes. If we have in statute that you should have that data and you don't, then they're not following the law and they're not being held accountable to the laws that we passed. And that's a problem.
And now, none of that was from my personal experience, but that was what was related to me by division staff. They cannot get that empathy.
Yes, I have also heard this.
Oh, you have? Okay, yeah. And so that helps. But it's a mess. It's a mess. And it's going to delay the launching in some ways of the division significantly if they have to mess with this. I mean, I talked with Tiffany a couple weeks ago, and I have some background statistics, so she was showing me the chi-squares and stuff like that. That was great, but I have a limit, and at which point I'm going, yeah, no, I stopped at differential calculus. I have no idea what you're talking about. And they did their best. They really did. They really, really did, given everything else they have to do. And they're, I suppose in a perfect world, the division would be broken into smaller constituent parts as well. But we can't do that. We don't have, there's no money for that. I know that. Certainly at the moment there's no staff for it. But that's something, you're right, that needs to be held, accountability. We do the best we can with keeping each other accountable. I mean, Sheila, Linton, and Rebecca are like the people who change my mind all the time.
I think as a legislature, we have a responsibility to hold departments and accountable to the laws we pass.
Yes, I think so too. And that's part of what I'm saying. I don't have the power. I just have the responsibility. And as my sainted mother, who is brilliant and talented, has said to me, she's a licensed clinical social worker, she's worked in lots of different places. When you don't have the power and you have the responsibility, there is nothing that situation is going to do except make you crazy. This was what she said to me last week. And she's right. That's exactly how I feel.
So, hey, Don, my question, and obviously there's a lot that needs to change, and I don't know who will fill your position.
We don't know. We're working on that.
What I would like to know, just for my own, just for logistics, for the upcoming session, what is a better approach to make sure that you are more involved, or the RDAP is more involved conversations here? Would it be joint hearings or individual requests, or just from where I'm sitting, it's an open door policy. People who want to come in and testify can. I don't think I've turned anyone away.
No, and that's not an issue.
So just in terms of planning for the next session, is there a preference for more joint hearings, individual hearings on specific bills, or just broader presentation to an individual committee?
I preface this by saying the details are not something the RDAP has totally come into because it's huge. I would say yes. Well, let me start with this. There has to be better communication between the two bodies. That is fundamental. That could take the form of anything that you've mentioned, and we can see how it goes. But there has to be better communication, whether that means that there are joint hearings, things like that. That would be fine. That would be possible. But again, it's the time of the panelists as well. You'll notice that none of the panelists from the southern part of the state often show up in this room, right? You know, because they have jobs. I mean, Sheila's job is job and a half at least. I mean, I can barely get her on the phone. I mean, I talk with Ms. Turner as much as I can, but she's busy too. And often, you know, we don't return texts until 2 or 3 days later. I mean, that's hard, but I think that's the direction we have to go in. I think we also have to restructure the RDAP. The best idea so far is the one that I've already related, which is I think at least during the session, we have to meet more frequently. Do. Another idea that has been floated is that the RDAP, and we've done this at times, needs to break into subcommittees. And there needs to be a specific subcommittee upon the RDAP that looks at bringing legislation to the entire body. That too would help.
Do you need legislation to do that? To have, or do you have, and I know this from my government operations hat, because that's my other committee. I know when we've created some boards and commissions and we have given them explicit permission to create subcommittees, and in other instances we haven't.
We haven't been given explicit.
Okay. So that may be something to do. It's probably too late this year, but I would certainly be happy to look into that and introduce a bill to do that, to give you that permission.
That would be nice.
Okay.
Because at the moment, we're probably breaking the law.
Okay. Well, let's just keep that between us and all of the viewers on Zoom.
Yeah.
But I would be more than happy
Thank you.
to introduce that for next year.
Yes, Dr. Jathan, I certainly appreciate your efforts past years. I remember when I first met you years ago, when Coach and I sat and Representative Christie sat on the House Judiciary Bank. We had several phone calls. You would call me when I was in the woodworking, but I'm sitting on some can or whatever else we talked for minutes on end in reference to this. We finally were able to find our way through. So I guess my concern is Susanna Davis's office clearly comes in here quite frequently too.
And she's on the board now.
Okay, so that was my question was the communication between the Division of Racial Justice Statistics, whom I thought had carte blanche as far as obtaining information, with statistics because we gave them that ability. And then you've got RDAP and you've got Susanna Davis's office, and they all sit on the board from what
Not everybody.
not everybody.
There are no permanent representatives from the division on the RDAP. After Justice Reinvestment 2, it was the enabling statute was amended to include Susanna, because when the position was the panel was imagined, that position didn't exist. So we thought that had to be remedied. And she gets 2 civilian members to appoint. That's part of what she does, and that's it. The division, I just know, does not have the time to come to every meeting. They do the best they can, but that's a big call because they're getting memoranda of understanding and they're analyzing data sets, and sometimes they're not sure which data set they should be analyzing. And in the case of public safety, they got the wrong one because I don't know why. There are apparently 3 of them. The data in the state that pertain to the RDAP's mandate are not in good shape. That's the basic.
So I guess my question is, it pertains to between the Division of Racial Justice Statistics, RDAP, and Susanna Davis's office. There's that communication that's going on, and I don't care who comes and testifies. All three are good, but is the message going to be the same or different depending on who we hear from?
Yeah.
I think that's always true, that it's going to be a bit different depending on who you hear from. But we tend to have broad agreement about broader issues that need to be discussed. Our first biennial report, it was like unicorns and rainbows. Everybody got along, everything was fine. That's not as much the case now. I don't think anyone reads that as a deterioration. It's just going to happen. But on the broadest level, there tends to be real agreement. And so I don't think you're going to find at the, not 30,000 foot, but at the 5,000 foot level, I think you're still going to find very broad agreement. Below that, you're getting into the weeds, and there's going to be stuff that gets sticky. Hope that helps.
Everything helps.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, and well, this sort of brings me back to my original, I guess, confusion and question is the Division of Racial Justice Statistics is a division within Susanna's office.
Correct.
And so I guess where I'm having a tough time understanding is with Susanna's office having a seat on the board, what's the communication gap that's happening here, given that division is within her office?
The problem isn't necessarily with the division and its communication with the panel.
Okay.
Think of it this way. The division has 10 tasks.
Yes.
One of them is communicating with the RDAP.
Yes.
So there's a time issue.
Mm-hmm.
They can't do it all. And there was a recognition of that after the high of investment too, and not necessarily promises that we get something concrete, but there was a promise that we would at least start talking about this and get to it. And I was really, as I've been saying, very clear about it needs to be a group effort because it's a systemic issue.
No, that's helpful. And then I guess sort of my other piece, and maybe I'm like misconstruing this in my head altogether, is with Susanna's office on the RDAP and quite regularly invited in here to weigh in on these, on most of the bills on this list and other bills as well. I actually have asked that they come in to weigh in on the next thing on our agenda. How can we, my construction of it has always sort of been that Susanna's office came out of the work of the RDAP to do the sort of staff work and advocacy work, and I must be missing something.
It didn't come out of the RDAP.
Just the Division of Racial Justice Statistics. Okay.
Yeah, no, that is separate. The one thing I'm going to say is there is a danger to siloing all work having to do with equity in one office that is explicitly called the Office of Racial Equity. Now, that problem is, okay, so racial issues are just over here. That's what they do. The reality is no one's got the time for that. It's much more systemic than that. Again, it's that there are 10 tasks and one of them is working with the RDAP and getting us up to speed. The same thing is true of the Office of Racial Equity. I don't know how well you know the director, but she is snow.
Oh, I know.
She, asking her to do one more thing. I mean, poor Susanna. I mean, there are some days where I'm like, remember that email I wrote 4 days ago? Could you please answer it? She's like mortified that she hasn't gotten to it, but she's that busy. Systemically, again, I look at that and go, we need more people. I know Melinda said. I mean, at the moment, the division is trying to prepare for September when the traffic data is released. They've got a huge job with that. And that's taking up a lot of their time. There just is not enough person power to do everything that needs to happen about this. Let me repeat, I think it's also a very bad idea to silo everything in an office that has the word racial in it. This should be general. It's why I'm very happy this office, or this panel, is under the Attorney General. It needs to be somewhere other than the Office of Racial Equity. Because then we're going to do it all from here. When the idea, if we're that has a systemic change, and the RDAP does, is we got to make this general. We've got to make this general. It won't work unless we make it general. The one piece of legislation that we had some in on is a short form bill that was submitted by Angela Arsenault in the House. Which was to at least start talking about what would legislation look like that an equity impact assessment would be completed on everything. But there are problems on the other side of that we've discussed, and we've discussed with Donna. Who is going to look at each one of those? That's a big one. Who's going to do that? I mean, I need to eat at some point, so it's not going to be me. We really have to come up with a solution for that one, and we don't have one yet. I'm answering the questions I can, and the ones that I can't, I can't. We haven't figured that one out yet.
I think that's a very difficult one. Not that I disagree with it, but it's, the fact we get at a minimum 1,000 bill introductions, and about 10% of them end up coming into law. So I think there's got to be, I'm sure there's some middle ground where the bills that have no chance of coming off the wall aren't going to waste anybody's time. Mm-hmm. But the bills that get introduced or have some movement are reviewed to some extent. Just a thought regarding what you just described.
Well, and that's exactly right. And what you just said, that's why I want a group of people to meet and talk this stuff through.
I think we already have a model for that, though, and it's JFO. It's creating an office that does the analysis. We have the Joint Fiscal Office that does fiscal analysis on any bill that has a fiscal impact that is moving. That is their job.
Right.
And so to me, we actually already have a model to do this. We don't have the money or the political will or whatever to implement it, but it is creating something similar to JFO that does the equity impact of every bill that's moving. Like, actually, we do know how to do it, and we do it for fiscal impact.
And they could, in fact, interact and liaise with the division because they keep a good list of the bills that they think have equity impacts. They put together charts. This is where the impact seems to lie. We're watching this. They already do that.
Yes.
So working with that JFO sort of thing.
The model is the point. Not asking JFO to do
it.
But we have a model for evaluating the impact of bills when it comes to the monetary impact.
Sure.
And to me, it's recreating that model, but the purpose is to evaluate the equity impact.
Right. And that's a great idea. It just, as I said, there's a lot of moving parts, and they're not all moving in sync. That is the difference.
Well, I mean, from where I'm sitting, I'll just say that one of the first hearings that we can schedule and come back is going to be a conversation about this. Hopefully a joint hearing with the House committee as well.
Great.
And the
RDAP will be pleased to hear that.
And I think I do also want to, I know you have two other members from the RDAP
We hear.
and I know, I do just want to provide them the opportunity if you want to chime in, if you have any thoughts, but if not, no pressure. I know you're just here to support a colleague, but.
Oh, thanks. Thank you, Sharon. I am here to support Eton. I think, and I'm happy to hear that people, very many people, and myself included, have just been in debt to Eton's tireless work for our generations, making sure that our concerns as a panel, the diverse concerns, and this place where we may, as an individual government representative, come to this witness chair and share different viewpoints. We have a place where we actually come together, and that is Eton's point as to the 5,000-foot view, that there is actually some broad consensus on these basic ideas, the recognition of problems, how to deal with them. I think I would only add this. I do want to emphasize Eton's suggestion that an institutionalized systemic problem does require many voices on the table, and we can start in the summer, whether it's an informal group to talk about these ideas, specific subjects, but it also could be, as Eton talked about, avoiding the problem of siloing these issues to just one person representing one organization with race in the title of the organization, to just having senators or representatives ask individual witnesses who are in there the question. And that displays the interest. And the witness then has to have some answers or suggestions or reveal the unknown. The point is that we don't have to wait for the solution, the data, the unified data. We don't need to wait for the bill on auditing. It can come from, and I just want to share this as a person who comes to the witness chair. I think a lot of the witnesses try to provide the answers you ask. If you give those questions to us in advance, even more useful. And if you ask the same question to all the witnesses, that would be very instructive, particularly because, as Eton said, all have different vantage points on that same question. I think that perspective is helpful. I think there can't be enough information on these important questions. We know there's a problem. We knew there was a problem a couple of years ago in racial disparities on these criminal and juvenile justice systems. And Crime Research Group is coming to our DAP next meeting next week. Talking about another data organization specializing in data. They are presenting, as I understand, the most current data that they've collected across that will confirm or reveal that the problem of racial disparities is ongoing. Present to the data that they're providing us, I don't know if it's 23 or 22, but CRG could be someone to come to the table as well, right? Again, we're not just siloing to.
Right.
That's all I wanted to share. We appreciate these issues being of such interest.
Yes.
We
do.
Thank you.
And even though I'm resigning, just let me throw in here, I have a sense I'm going to be a shadow person for a while. Because I'm institutional memory, and so I'll be right. I'm not going to just leave them. I mean, that would be cool.
I'm glad you'll still be around to some extent. Todd, did you want to?
Sure. Todd Delos from the Attorney General's office. Appreciate the opportunity just to jump in. I've only been working with RDAP for 6 or 8 months now. My brief reflection, and I think the letter lays this out, is, to Rebecca's point, the Defender General's office and the AG's office aren't often aligned. And you certainly, engage in semi-productive conversations during RDAP. But where we are completely aligned, that 5,000-foot level as laid out in the letter, is a desire to see equity across the board raised more thoroughly through the legislative process on a systemic level. Individual senators are going to raise things that hurt you, like any human with a lived experience is going to raise certain things that come to them. And I think what we'd advocate for, and whether it's RDAP or an independent office that's part of the legislature somewhere down the road, incorporating that kind of engagement, not simply looking to ORE, Susanna, her team, but broadly looking at, outside the organs of state government for more input and building among all of us an equity construct to think through, okay, how does this potential legislation impact communities of color, veterans, individuals with disabilities? How are we really looking at things across the board? For RDAP, I would also just say, and I think this is something we're also going to do at our next meeting, is let's look at the charge that's in 3 VSA 168 and see what the legislature has asked us to do and how best we can focus on that work as a part of this broader equity work. Because I think it's laid out to some extent there. And then it also helps us see, are we providing value to the legislature through that work and therefore to the state of Vermont? So there's definitely a lot of room for fruitful discussion. I think there's a lot of value in the discussion we have in RDAP as well. And the real question is how we bring that value more accurately and effectively to you all as you're making. Because one thing I would say, a reflection I had is we talk about it in RDAP, sometimes we get in this charitably fantastical space as though RDAP could come up with the legislation.
Right.
Right. That structure exists and it's this building. And so we also have to recognize an impact assessment is not the law. An impact assessment, just like a financial assessment, just like any other number of policy choices you make, influence how you determine what the policy and the law needs to be. But at the end of the day, those conversations occur in these rooms as part of the legislative process. And we simply are advocating for more voice within that and ensuring that issues of equity, specifically in the criminal justice and juvenile justice systems, but broadly as you consider it.
Thank you. Well, I was just going to say, Ton, I wanted to give you the final word.
This panel hasn't reached its potential. It just hasn't. Partly, mostly because of these problems. When the enabling statute was a biennial report, looking at the entire criminal and juvenile justice system, well, we did that, and then we did it again last February. It was late coming in, but Martin LeBlanc was like, it's okay, we got other stuff going on. So we brought that in, and very few things on that have changed. We're due to submit another report in December, and I floated to the RDAP. I think we should submit the last report with a cover letter about why we're doing so. There's no point in repeating what's already been said. And I know the letter is here. So at the very basic level of the enabling statute, we're doing that. I don't know how many times you have to do it, though, right? Because it's a big list. Nothing moves quickly. I mean, it's a 40-page report, including its appendices. So it changed. Our sunset was repealed. We were told to, definitely look at these bills. And that's where we're at. And this is where we all need to pull together to come up with a solution. Or maybe solutions. I don't know. That's still open. I can't be everybody.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to see you in person. I'm glad you're
Good to see you in person. We keep not having dinner.
I know. We'll find that out.
Okay. Thank you all for listening, and thank you for your attention. We needed it. We needed it.
Good.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Oh, okay. You have some.
Is Michelle still?
Yeah, Michelle is on Zoom. Oh,
I am curious if you have thoughts on this amendment they're about to talk about.
Oh.
Yeah. But I have to go to House the Box.
Okay.
well, stick around.
Okay. I'll move over back there. Okay.
Hi, Michelle.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your patience too. We just wanted to talk about that amendment for H222, and yes, the floor is yours.
Sure. So for the record, Michelle Childs, Office of Legislative Counsel. And my understanding is that you just wanted to focus for this morning on this one amendment to Section 2. I'm going to share my screen. You should have, I'm sure that Will has given you a copy of the amendment. So just as a little refresher, so Section 2 in the proposal that came over from the House, and this is having to do with the Title 15 family abuse prevention orders. And this is the section dealing with the final orders, not the emergency ex parte orders. And one of the additions here was for the court to be able to order as a condition of the RFA for the defendant to complete a domestic violence accountability program that's been approved by the Council on Domestic Violence. So I think, as you already know, there's a provision 13 VSA 1030 that provides it's a misdemeanor criminal offense for violation of civil protection orders, and that applies to these Title 15 orders, the Title 12 sexual assault and stalking orders, as well as the orders for protection for vulnerable adults. And so if someone violates a condition of a civil protection, final civil protection order, there is this crime that can be charged in Title 13. And the proposal in the House had this language that you'll see that is being struck in your amendment, which is that failure to complete the program shall not be considered a crime and is not a violation of Section 1030, but could subject the defendant to civil contempt proceedings. And so your proposal in this amendment is just striking that language. So the default would be that it would just be like any other condition of the final order, and a state's attorney could choose to charge under 1030 for a violation.
Got it. Thank you. So in summary, when we have these protection orders, such as you can't contact the victim and be within however many feet of the victim, they violate those orders, they may be prosecuted under 1030.
Correct.
And if we're adding this new piece, the requirement of attending the programming, and with this amendment, we are saying that if you fail to complete the domestic violence prevention programming, you may be prosecuted for the same thing.
Right. Right. So it would just be like the other conditions of the RFA, rather than kind of have this kind of unique, this is not subject to the provisions of 1030. I think, you may have heard from some of the witnesses, House Judiciary's decision to go with an alternative, and there was a lot of debate around that and whether that was appropriate, was just that it's a little bit different because of the continuing nature of the programming, that it can take I think up to 26 weeks, those types of things. But I think it's really about whether or not the person is, I think the testimony in the House was whether the person is participating in that, and that there were, I don't know if you spoke to somebody on the Council on Domestic Violence. Did you talk with Carolyn or somebody there about the types of programming? I don't want to, testify on their behalf. They are much more knowledgeable about it than I am, but I think there are avenues to kind of check on that, and they have criteria for in each of those programs about what they consider someone actually participating. So it's not like somebody has, if they miss meeting, a meeting here and there, but if they completely drop out for a certain period of time with no contact, I think then that's considered to be that they're not participating any longer.
Thank you. Committee, any thoughts?
Well, I guess such as I said the other day, it's not a deal breaker for me. I prefer to have all court orders follow in sync, but if this is the last amendment here, if that's something that you choose to So my understanding is the rest of those corridors would be a criminal offense, violation of criminal offense. And now we're cutting this out or carving this out, making it a civil offense. But I was just looking for consistency throughout the procedure. A court order is a court order. Like I said, it's not a deal breaker for me. If the court orders something, there should be some reaction from the courts, be it criminal and or civil. So yeah. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way, but it's certainly not going to step away.
I do have a question. How do we end up with this is the first time city events, how do we end up with the civil violation?
We were taking it out. So how did we end up with it? Originally, that was what came over from the House, and this amendment strikes out the language that says it's a civil violation. Yesterday, it seemed like the majority of the committee wanted to move in this direction of striking out that language. I mean, my position yesterday is the same as it is today, which is I think it's fine to keep it as a civil violation. But I also don't think the bill should stall because of that. And the House will still have to deliberate as to whether or not they're going to accept our changes. I haven't heard from Senator Baruth as to whether or not he has different opinions. I don't want to assume Senator Polsky, but I haven't heard that she's changed her. But yeah, that's what. So I guess when we have a full committee, we can take a straw poll. We can think over it, think on it over the weekend. Just now that we have the amendment in front of us, heard from Michelle, the straw poll Tuesday when we have a full committee as to whether or not to officially move forward with putting the amendment in, and then we can vote on the bill. Sound good? Any witnesses in the room want to chime in? Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Which part? Which part?
That failure to complete a program that is designed to lessen the potential for recidivism. Of course, that should be part of the program. I mean, without question. And if you haven't done it, there are consequences. Actions have consequences. Inactions have consequences. Not all of them good, but maybe quite necessary.
Could you identify yourself for the record?
I'm sorry, I didn't even do that.
Yeah.
Dr. Eitan Nasreddin Longo, chair of the RDAP, Racial Disparities Advisory Panel.
Thank you. Okay. I don't think there's anything. Actually, Michelle, is there anything else?
There is not, but let me know if you think of anything else. Happy to do it. But I think my understanding is that this is just your final decision point.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And I hope everything going well.
It is. Thanks. I'll be back tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Alrighty. We have anything else on the agenda?
Nope.
All right. Fantastic.